Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insights through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
Welcome to this powerful episode of the Core Women Podcast, where I'm joined by Dr. Monique Mendoza, a licensed psychologist, strategic advisor, and national expert in workplace violence prevention. With over a decade of specialized experience in healthcare, higher education, and corporate settings, Dr. Mendoza is redefining how organizations approach employee safety, not with fear, but with care, clarity, and confidence. She trains over 800 professionals each year, guiding organizations to build resilient, trauma-informed cultures where psychological and physical safety work hand in hand. Her mission is to make safety strategic, stigma-free, and a cornerstone of business success. Welcome, Dr. Mendoza.
Thank you, Summer. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you here. I can't wait to jump into this. But before we jump into the aspects of your professional life, if you could describe your journey in one word to this point, what would that word be and why?
Describing my journey in one word, challenging, but I'm going to say that it is fearless. And I'm going to say fearless because when I started school, when I was starting off my work as a psychologist, I did not know that I would end up here. And I kept pushing into places where I felt like, what is this? What are we talking about when we talk about workplace violence, when we talk about different areas? And it was unknown, not only to me, but to everyone, to businesses and to organizations. And I like to bring order to chaos. And so just kept walking through and seeing how can we keep going on something that feels really unknown.
Yeah, and that's pretty courageous as well, because when you're walking into the unknown, it feels a little awkward.
Mhm.
And then to present that to others and help them become more familiar with the concepts, with the ideas, with how you're going to apply A, B, or C as you adopt this into your organization or company, that's unique. That's a unique feeling. That's a unique process. So let's move on to the next question because we are going to talk about some different process oriented questions and how people can really embrace this, understand this, and why this is so important. So, you spent over a decade working in healthcare, higher ed, and in corporate settings. How did your work in psychology evolve into the specialized focus of workplace safety and violence prevention? You gave us just a tad of that, but give us a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, I started working as a psychologist and I focused on those that were at the highest place of risk, those that had risk of harm to themselves or harm to others. And as I was working with individuals one on one, what I also saw was the worry and the concern that would happen to those outside of the therapy space that were trying to support them. Those with maybe it's their employers, their family, their friends, coworkers, colleagues. I saw this place of dread and concern over what do I do and how can I get that support? I also saw this place of people actually wanting to support others and just didn't have the tools to do it. And I'm sort of this like 3,000-foot level thinker anyways. And so I saw, I think I can help them also. I think I can break out of the helping on this one-on-one and come to the place on the other side of it or helping on this larger scale to show organizations that we can put in places of support. We don't have to operate from a place of fear and that the tools that I have as a psychologist could actually be valuable to the working spaces that people are integrated in.
Okay, I'm going to take a few steps back here because of what you said. I'm also a doctor of clinical psych. I've worked in spaces where I've assessed folks and also where family members, other folks have been really frightened and didn't know how to help the one that they loved, or maybe somebody they knew, or somebody they were familiar with, or maybe they didn't know how to access the resources. And so it sounds like you've walked in those same kind of spaces.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of frustration at that point where somebody comes to see you, whether they're suicidal, homicidal, gravely disabled, or they're impacted by something else that's influencing their behavior. How did you assess this? Not just the individual, but the other folks that were players in this situation, trying to help support this person in crisis, perhaps.
Yeah. That's a great question, Summer. The first thing I think about is the place of fear that comes in with like, what action do I take? And when we're talking about those at this highest level of mental health concern and maybe even significant like crisis that is happening, it feels like their actions are very consequential. So if I walk down a place of support for somebody, what if it's the wrong one? What if it's the one that makes it worse? And so I saw a lot of this fear around, I don't want to make it worse. I want to help, but I don't know what to do. And I feel really like debilitating place of, I don't know what action to take. And so I'm feeling isolated in that. And so I saw a lot of that in that place of like, I am hearing that there may be places for support, but no one knows what to do with that.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I do is often just name that and just say, this is a situation that is not super common. This is not happening in your everyday. So no one is expecting you to have the right answer. And really just acknowledging that anybody and when we're experiencing or connecting with somebody that's in a mental health crisis, it is something that is unique in that situation and in that moment. And unless you're a psychologist treating people, it's not happening in your everyday. So wanting to acknowledge that. And then also starting with what I knew was available for resources and support. You know, here's the next step. Here's what could happen in the next few days that could be really helpful for you to support them and support the situation. Here's some information that is helpful, whether it's like community resources or just things that I knew about how to talk to somebody that you could actually use. You don't, it doesn't have to be specific to a psychologist to say the same words of support and caring and empathy.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So I'm going to ask my next question, which is you shifted this from the individual to the organization. You're going into these spaces where they're being challenged.
Yeah.
They don't know the resources. Maybe this language is unfamiliar to them, although now we're seeing more and more of these crises take place in the workplace, right? But I know by experience, I don't go into communities, whether that is a local community, organizational community, and I don't go in there and say, oh, I know exactly what you need. So, what do you do when you first go into an organization with this idea of community safety? What do you do? Do you do an assessment? Do you talk to A, B, and C folks? Tell us more.
Yeah, I still will ask a couple of questions in that first place. And for some of the inter clients that I have, it's really thinking about what brought you to talk with me today. And for many, it can be something that has happened recently or something that has happened at a previous place that they worked at that they see a gap. So that's always a great place. It's one of the main questions that I'll ask, like, what's going on right now? Or was there something recently that happened? And when I often see that question being asked about what recently happened, it can be around a situation that happened and we had no idea what to do. We felt like our hands were tied with what to do next. And for those that really can take it to that next level, they'll say, and we know that we don't want to be in that situation again. I don't
Mm,
want to be in a situation where I don't know what to do next, or we got out of that situation and we worry that it could have been worse and it wasn't. So, those are questions that I'll often hear and see. That's the place where those things sit with them. Those are the things that keep them up at night around how they're supporting their organization or what they don't want to happen to their organization moving forward.
yeah, great questions by those organizations, and yet they're functioning in a place of fear at that point. What led you to challenge traditional fear-based safety protocols and embrace a trauma-informed, resilient-driven approach? What led you to that?
Yes. So I see these places where you'll open up something, especially following maybe a very public situation that's happened within a workplace, something where the media has grabbed hold of it. And many things around that are connected to what is something we can put in place tomorrow? What is some additional security measure? Or a lot of messages of like, don't let this happen to you. So a lot of this fear about what could be the next step if you're not taking action today. And what I see with that is it's often playing on our ideas of saying, I want to feel comfortable in this moment. And maybe it's not a super informed decision. Maybe it's not the best decision for our team, but it feels like something happens. And many of those things, such as like a quick security measure, those types of things, they fizzle out. They don't work because you haven't talked with your employees about what they need. They don't see it as effective either. And you end up draining money into something that felt like a quick fix and ultimately is just like a long-term expense. So when I talk with them, I'll talk a little bit around coming to what the employees, what others within the space and environment are looking for. Because I will guarantee you, this is not the first day that they've thought about their safety. And so they have ideas, they have thoughts, they have ways that we can improve it and make it better. And I love to incorporate those into that. It's also a part of the trauma informed approach is that we don't take ideas around security from a top down perspective. Me saying from the top as a leader, I know how to keep you safe, and this is the way it is. And there's no information about how you might actually feel about that. So that's an example of it not being trauma informed. And we want to make sure that all are included in that conversation to see that it actually is going to be an effective intervention. And the other piece around it is that the trauma informed piece is going to look at how your actions match up with the words and the statements that you're making to the teams. So if you're saying we're the safest workplace in the world and you have people that don't feel comfortable coming into the office, that don't feel comfortable having conversations with others, then your actions are not matching up with what you're announcing to your teams and what you're even announcing publicly.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to take a step back because I like what you said about this shift not really happening from top down.
Mhm.
I have an idea of why,
Yeah.
but I want you to tell us more about why you don't start there.
Great question. Yes. So a lot of it is oftentimes within the top down approach, our leaders are not on the front line. They're not interacting with colleagues and coworkers. And also, there is a place of power and protection from what can happen and any places of concerns about threats or retaliation or those types of things. And so, we're not taking into account what that day to day experience is for the employees. On the other side, when we do take that into account, we do consider what those day to day experiences are. And when we're listening to them, we can better tailor what our approaches are and also prioritize what the approaches are. So I might come in and say, we have to lock every single door in this place at 5 o'clock. That is my top down approach. We're locking every single door at 5 o'clock, no matter what. And if I don't hear from the employees, I don't realize that people are actually staying until 6 o'clock, that we have a group that comes in at 5:30, that we have employees that are just in this small corner of the building. And we didn't even know that they're so much used to coming in and out as they need to get their work done. So we're not attending to what are the actual needs to keep our employees productive and safe when we're looking at it from just a top-down approach.
Right. And there again is reason for assessment, needs assessment, all that good information gathered to better understand how this community is functioning. Number one. And two, as you talk about this not being top down, I'm wondering as well how you make this more of a horizontal structure where you're getting that information from those that are on the front line, but then you're also bringing in those from the top
Mhm.
where communication silos are not there. There's more open communication, there's better exchange of ideas, there's safety being created. What really influences that?
Yeah, so it's not just one piece or component. So when we're thinking about how do we add more skills to the group, it's not just like a 1 hour, one-off training thing. What it can look like is a strategic approach born out of everyone's input with that. So when I talk about that with potential clients, I'll look at how has training been in the past and who attends and who are we missing? And I'll use that from an example within a healthcare setting. So we have those that work within healthcare and say, oh, we can train all of our clinical teams. They have this hour that we can huddle and then we can talk about that. And I'll often ask them, what about your non-clinical teams? When are they giving that space? Do they have access to a virtual training space? What are the ways that they interact? Because they make up just as high percentage of the employees in that space as well. And we don't want to miss that as an opportunity. So we look at it from that perspective. When you're talking about having this horizontal approach, it's seeing where we're going to impact any of the groups within the environment there. And then it's also looking at what does this look like to keep what we're learning and training about and institutionalize it into your policies, into your practices moving forward. And who knows about them? So let's dust off that injury and illness prevention plan, your workplace violence prevention plan, and actually let's make it useful so we can refer back to it so others know that that's where the resources and information are moving forward. And so that it's not person focused. So it's not that one champion that you had that was huge on safety and then they just happened to take a new job and now we have no idea how we move forward with it. So we're looking at really making sure it's an institutionalized thing that's a continued commitment within the organization.
Yeah, and something that they will actually do,
Yes,
which is really important because I know even with individual or group clients, a lot of times you'll come in and say, well, we can do A, B, and C. But if they're not invested and it doesn't work within their framework, are they actually going to follow through and do these things?
exactly, exactly.
So, what does it look like when psychological safety and physical security actually intersect in a healthy workforce?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I think about with psychological safety is really this place of how your comfort level is with bringing forward your thoughts, your concerns about what's going on in your work environment. And when you're able to do that, you're able to ask questions. You're able to bring up things that maybe feel like I'm not sure what happens or I'm not sure what's going on with this. And are able to test out things that maybe even an employee feels in their gut that doesn't seem right. And so those are things that are really helpful. When you have an environment where employees feel safe to be able to voice their concerns and talk about what's going on, we can address some of the physical security things that are happening, such as shouldn't that door be locked at all times? Or did I just see somebody come in to our building that I haven't noticed before, that maybe snuck in behind somebody that badged in? Now, in a place where it doesn't feel psychologically safe or it doesn't feel safe to bring up these potentially pieces that are concerns, then we allow for concerns to come in and say, well, I'm not going to be the one to talk about it. I'm not going to be the one to bring it up. And then we have one person doing that. We may have others doing that. And all of a sudden, we have a lot of places where our physical security that we have is compromised. So when we're able to bring these things up in a place that feels approachable to our leadership, in a place where we know that these things are going to be addressed and that concerns are going to be taken seriously, then I would feel more comfortable as serving as that individual champion for all of us to be safe in that environment. So I can say, Bob, I saw somebody come in behind you. Is that somebody that also has a badge or is that somebody that you're aware of? And I feel comfortable reaching out and checking in about that because I want to make sure that we're all in this environment together and that we're all taking our own safety seriously.
It's such a good example. That's so important because when you work through these trainings, it becomes more familiar. You know, you're not asking a question to really push on somebody's control button. It's not to trigger somebody or for somebody to feel like, oh, what are they tapping into A, B, and C and having a control issue or a struggle with each other? No, that's not what it's about. It's more about opening those lines of communication, the ability to work better together, more of that creativity to flow effectively so that you can work in spaces that are healthier and safer. So I love that example. Thanks so much. You train over 800 people a year. What have you learned from that level of hands-on work with leadership teams and frontline professionals?
I learned that people are taking in the information in all different ways. So I often incorporate this time within our trainings to really have a Q&A where I will start with the questions to the group and say, here are some things that I presented about. What are your thoughts? Where do you think that this can apply in your setting? Because we're all looking at it from different perspectives and different angles. And I want to understand where people are taking in that information and how it's become meaningful for them as they apply it to their work. And I think that's an important piece because we could walk through a standard click the enter button online training, but we don't know what anybody is taking away from that. We don't have a full sense about that. So I like to incorporate that piece to understand and recognize we're all coming from different perspectives. We all have different histories, backgrounds, previous workplaces where these things may have already been talked about, but how are they applying and how are they going to be implemented here in this current space? And I think that that's an important piece to consider. And it's something that I always like to incorporate when we're doing those training pieces.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I've absolutely loved what has happened here in regards to the evolution of this conversation. But as we come to the close of the interview, my last question is, what's the one mindset shift organizations need to make to stop treating safety as a compliance task and start seeing it as a driver of culture and performance?
Yes. So one of the things that I think about is that putting safety as a priority, changing your mindset from if to when. So if we start thinking about safety as like, this is a nice to have, this is something where we can check the box and move on and cross our fingers and hope that we don't have to use that. What we're missing is that our teams are asking for us to help understand safety in this environment. And those policies, procedures, regulations that we've developed are the backbone of how we're going to move forward as a culture. That's what we're going to ultimately rely on to see how do we incorporate those into our mission, vision, and values of an organization. And I think it's just important to consider that we don't have to think about the biggest crisis situation for safety measures to be activated, that it could be around something that's happening down the street from your organization that's still impacting your employees that are walking or driving to your workplace. And so there are a lot of places where if we have this safety pieces in place, we can expand the opportunities for when we know that we need to offer additional support to our employees.
Thank you so much for that great answer. And thank you, Dr. Mendoza, for joining me on the Core Women podcast today.
Thank you so much, Summer. It was so great to speak with you today.
Absolutely. I had a great time, and this is great information. You can follow Dr. Monique Mendoza on LinkedIn at Monique Mendoza, PhD, and at psychsolutions.com.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women, and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a Core Women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.